When I think about middle managers, what I immediately think about is their really important role linking senior leaders and frontline employees. And everybody has a role to play in our work ecosystem, right? Senior leaders provide direction, they provide strategy, they provide resources and priorities. And your frontline workers are the ones who are ultimately executing on whatever those strategies and priorities are. And then in the middle, you've got these managers whose job is to really be that linking function between the two, turning big strategy into actionable steps that their frontline employees can take. And when we come into a merger scenario, what ends up happening is those middle managers are often left behind. In my mind, that is one of the most cruel things that we can do to a human being is put them in a position where they are forced to not only navigate their own change journey, but now they have to go take care of the employees that they lead because most middle managers feel responsible for the well-being of their employees. And so because of that, whenever possible, I think it's important to give middle managers a preview of whatever it is that you're doing. They end up carrying a lot of that emotional water, trying to often negotiate salaries or negotiate idiosyncratic deals where there's sort of one-off arrangements. And all of the time that they're doing that, they're not able to focus on their own journey and their own process of dealing with, you know what, they're in the exact same position as the employees they're trying to deal with, right? They don't know what their pay looks like,
Right.
their future looks like. So I really think that we need to give middle managers some extra love. And we do that by giving them a heads up before an announcement meeting, 30 minutes before. Pull your middle managers in, tell them what's going on, number one. Number two, give them some resources. A lot of people are familiar with what's called the Bridges transition model. The other one that we do is the Kubler-Ross model, which is the stages of grief. And either of those are great for that middle manager. And then third, we give them resources to deal with their own reactions.
Hmm.
So I often recommend things like the company's employee assistance program. Sometimes having that neutral third party listen is a really great way to give managers some space so they're not feeling like they have to complain to their boss. They can talk to somebody who actually is trained to understand human behavior and have those conversations. I will hold office hours. I'm not a therapist, but I understand what's going on in M&A. And so we'll try to answer those concerns as best we can. And I try to encourage their leaders to do the same thing to make sure that those managers have the resources they need.
That's great stuff. I think you're absolutely right. They just get lost in the shuffle, and they are not only caring for all the people who work for them, but they also need to care for themselves. How about toolkits in terms of cascading, not just messaging down, really helping a mid-level manager explain and articulate why we're doing this and what it means and why it's important to us, that kind of thing. How do you generally do that?
Yeah. So again, in my experience, we provide those resources usually during the meeting and then some sort of FAQ document. I've not personally done this, but I know that some firms will buy, there's some books out on the market that kind of help walk managers through their process. Price Pritchett used to be the gold standard back in the 80s and 90s. And I have a bookshelf full of M&A books, and I've actually got a few of those that I've looked through. I'm like, these aren't bad. I wonder why we stopped doing that. The tools are really important to have. I think what's as important is understanding when to deploy them. When I think about the journey, there's these inflection points. So when the deal gets announced, big inflection point, empower your middle managers. When you issue the offer letters, some firms will issue those on announcement day, which there's pros and cons to each practice. I personally like it because it gives employees the assurance that they have a job because they've got an
Mhm.
offer letter, right? So if you can do that closer to announce, I think that's great. But when the offer letters are released, giving those middle managers a heads up on what their employees are going to get offered, really helpful for them to help
Sure.
explain what's going on with the employee. When the deal closes, I think that's another good time to have conversations with those managers. And then finally, when the payroll transition occurs, if it does occur, when everybody has a new payroll provider, a new pay schedule, new benefits, and any other major changes, those are times in my mind when you want to pull those managers in
Mm.
and you want to have a very specific conversation with them.